Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today at IEEE Pulse. We have our industry corner live here, and I have the pleasure and honor of being with co-founder and CTO of Biolink, Jared Tangney. Welcome, Jared.
Thanks, Chad.
We've got an amazing product to cover with, but as always in IEEE, our readers, our supporters, our young engineers and young entrepreneurs and people translating out of research. So hearing your story is I'm looking forward to today. But let's start with that. Let's tell us a little bit about your background and your education.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my background is a PhD in biomedical engineering. So had the privilege of studying at beautiful UC San Diego. And really my focus during my time there was on medical devices, and that was an area that I got interested in very early on. But yeah, I had the opportunity to really start to look at some very interesting technologies during my time there. And ultimately had the privilege of licensing one of those straight out of school and spun it right into BioLink. So I like to say this is the only real job I've ever had has been BioLink. So it's been an awesome opportunity. But happy to dig further into that.
Yeah, actually, similar story in my world. But did you ever follow the professor route while you were there, or was it straight out of your post-grad work?
No, I kind of always knew that industry was something that I wanted to focus on. I come actually from a family of entrepreneurs, so I got the opportunity to watch my dad start many companies over the years, as well as my grandfather. So that was a pretty awesome experience. Got exposed to technology at a young age. Actually, my dad and one of his side businesses taught me how to solder electronics at the age of probably about 10, which was a bold move. I don't know that I would let my 10-year-old use a soldering iron, but I guess he had faith in me. Um, yeah, so just had that real focus from the beginning. And I guess, the one drawback to kind of the industry or the professor route is just the continuing to have to write grants and follow down that pathway. Now, I think it's a really great way to incubate early technologies for sure. But for me, it was always about that translation. How do we take something and actually get it into the hands of users, get it in the hands of patients?
Oh, that's great. Yeah, actually, my daughters love to watch me solder as I melt metal. So
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
good lineup for history. But it sounds like you spent a lot of time incubating it in your postgrad work, but also, I guess, translating it out of the university as its own process. So describe a little bit of that timeline and how you knew it was time to move it on.
Yeah, that's a great question. When it was when my co-founder Josh and I first decided that hey, there's an opportunity here. The technology was obviously very early, right? There'd been a couple publications showing that hey, you can measure interesting biomarkers through these wearable sensors, and so we thought, okay, hey, there's some big applications here. But had never at that stage the technology had never been on a person before, right? It's just benchtop data. So there was a period of time there where we really had to prove out that we could translate this from something that you could measure on the bench to something that could ultimately become a product and get into the hands of users. So there was a period there of a couple years where we were grant funded by the NIH, which was a real blessing. Really enabled us to get it to a point where it had some legs, and we could show that it could be translated to something wearable that could go onto people. So there was I'd say about a 2 year period where we were investigating advancing the technology and turning it from a very rough prototype that could never be worn by a person to something that went into early human feasibility studies. And that early NIH grant funding is really what enabled that.
No, that's great. First question, which institute were you working with at the NIH? And then how long was it from inception, I guess, to those early feasibilities?
Yeah, good question. So we were working with the NIDDK at the NIH, really with some of the early interest in diabetes applications. So a new form of continuous glucose monitoring was where some of the initial interest came. That then translated to looking at other things like lactate, which is also of interest to the NIDDK, as additional inputs into some closed loop systems. And there was about a 2 year period from when we first said, "Hey, here's some grant funding, building out wearable prototypes, refining sensor chemistries, really working through some of the details there before we went into our first formal first in human study." There was some animal studies along the way, but what we found is that with our approach, which is measuring within the skin itself, and as opposed to the sub-Q, like a traditional continuous glucose monitor, that actually going into human studies was a big step, right? Human skin is very, very unique. And so getting into those human feasibility studies was a big milestone for us. And that's really what enabled us to raise, more serious venture capital, was getting into those human feasibility studies. But it was about a 2 year period from kind of starting to early human clinical data.
Got it. Yeah, that's actually pretty fast. So congrats on that. And then it
Yeah.
sounds like you were able to get venture capital. At what point were you able to get any private capital, or were you all, non-dilutive seed grants, or did you get some angels on the way? I think a lot of people want to know and hear how it usually goes, or just every story that it can get as people try to figure out how to be an entrepreneur in this space. So,
Yeah, yeah. Our pathway was a bit unique. So we did have that opportunity through the NIH early on, which was, like I said, just very fortunate to be able to go down that pathway that allowed us to get some early feasibility showing that this was possible. We then actually had the opportunity to raise a seed round of funding, which was led by Mark Cuban, of all people. So he actually heard about us through some colleagues. And actually, funny story, we when we first started raising capital, we put up a newsletter and just allowed people to stay informed on what we were doing at BioLink. And literally the very first day that we put up the newsletter, the first person to sign up on the BioLink newsletter was Mark Cuban. So I can't get more lucky than that. So, as a first-time entrepreneur, I was like, oh, hey, this fundraising thing is easy, right? Mark Cuban or billionaires just sign up to your newsletters and then they invest in your company, right? This is so easy. Obviously, we were proven that it's very challenging to raise capital, but yeah, very lucky and fortunate that Mark came in as an early investor, really saw the potential of wearable sensor technologies, and at that point, really wanted to see it on the Dallas Mavericks, being a majority owner at that point in time, and so. Yeah, raised a seed round in 2014. That was just shy of $1 million, and that kind of helped us complement the NIH dollars that we had received. And then from there went on to really use that seed money to run those first in human studies. And with the first in human data, went on to raise a Series A, which was led by Merck Ventures and Hikma Ventures in 2017. And that was about a $15 million Series A. And from there, we were kind of off to the races to continue to raise more and more capital. And today, we've raised just shy of $300 million to date.
wow, that's great. Yeah, it's a fun journey to see in the beginning, and I don't know if that forces you to become a Dallas Mavericks fan, but hopefully you enjoy
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
Uh,
definitely had to hide some of the Golden State Warriors
yeah.
gear that I had as a Bay Area native. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, you can't let down Steph Curry either on that.
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So that's a great journey. So high level overview, and we can dive down into each of them. At what point did you guys enter into sales? And then at what point, or how long does it all take, from your raises to getting your first sales into maybe a second generation product? Tell a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, I can tell you it takes a lot longer than you ever expect, but I think that's probably the cliche answer by now. Yeah, so our journey getting into continuous glucose monitoring, which has just been a space that's absolutely transformed the lives of people with diabetes, you know, just the existing technologies that are out there as well. It takes a long time. So we actually submitted to the FDA for our first product, which is a continuous glucose monitoring technology, focused on a little bit of a different segment of the population, people that are not on insulin, people with either type 2 diabetes or prediabetes or even without diabetes that are not on insulin. And so we submitted at the end of 2024. As of the time of recording, are hopeful that we get clearance any day here. So that'll actually allow us to finally sell our first formal products here very, very soon, hopefully. Fingers crossed. So it takes a long time. So it was, all in from kind of start of the formal start of the project to being able to sell our first product was about a decade. It's a long time. Now, in parallel, we've got other versions and second gen products that are in the pipeline that are coming right behind, as well as expanding beyond glucose. So we'll be able to measure other markers. I mentioned lactate. That was something that the NIH helped us to accelerate as well. But we have a whole list of different things we can measure with this platform, and starting with glucose, starting with diabetes in that segment, but so many things that we can measure that will really give amazing insights to our bodies that just currently aren't available today.
No, it sounds incredible. Let's dive into some of that technology that enables it,
Yeah.
and then explain how it got to diabetes. But diabetes is ripe for all sorts of innovations or a lot of gaps and spaces that have been needed to change. I had some university entrepreneurs that were working on tear duct measurement
Yes.
for that, so what is the BioLink innovation? What really opened the door for you guys to raise money for everyone to see the vision, and then now hitting to FDA clearance means that it works. What did you guys do? What is the innovation?
Yeah, the key here, and I think this will be interesting for a lot of your audience, is we took a very different approach, right? We said there's amazing technologies that are out there today for continuous glucose monitoring, but a lot of that technology hasn't changed a lot. The electronics have gotten smaller, and that's been a huge advantage. But the actual approach to sensing glucose has not changed much in the last 20 years. What we found is that the skin is a very interesting place to do sensing. And the reason for that is, just below the surface of our skin is this very rich and dense capillary bed. And that's how, as you probably know, when we exercise, that's the way that our body can, dissipate heat, right? We get more blood flow to the skin to kind of, cool our body down, right? That's why sometimes your skin can get flushed when you're hot or when you're exercising. So we really take advantage of that capillary bed that's right under our skin and that we sense right next to it. So we don't go into the bloodstream, but we're measuring with these tiny sensors, microsensors that are sometimes referred to as microneedles. But when you look at them, they're so small, they really look like sandpaper.
Hmm.
So we're measuring just within that first few hundred microns of the skin. So that means for the user, there's no pain, right? You don't feel anything when you apply these to the body. You just feel the pressure of applying a wearable device to the skin that has a medical grade adhesive. But our approach to sensing really leverages semiconductors
Hmm.
and silicon. So it's a very interesting way to do sensing, very, very different. So, right, instead of going, about a centimeter or so, or sometimes a half a centimeter into the tissue, like a traditional CGM, we're only going 2 to 400 microns. So very, very shallow. And the way to do that is leveraging silicon, like I mentioned. And there's some very unique properties of silicon that we leverage, right? The material properties, being very mechanically robust. We have multiple microsensors on one of our wearable devices, And that allows us to have multiple channels of data that come into our system. So instead of just one sensor filament like a traditional CGM, we can have, on the order of, even close to a dozen different inputs into the system. And what that means is that when you're measuring something like glucose, you have multiple channels of data. So, right, so from a data perspective, an algorithm perspective, you have uh, redundancy, right? That gives you better reliability with your system. But really, the reason we designed it this way is for multi-analyte measurement. So instead of measuring just glucose, we can measure things like lactate and cortisol and a whole list of things that are in development. So really the innovation leverages silicon and the mechanical properties of it as well as the scalability of it. So we actually make our sensors on an 8-inch silicon wafer, and we can fit thousands of our sensors on these 8-inch wafers. And we're working with foundry partners that can kind of turnkey scale these to hundreds of millions of units. And that's the challenge, right? For many of us that are developing technology, it's hard to get it from that initial prototype to something that can be manufactured. And that's one of the benefits of working in silicon is that from prototype to scale is actually fairly straightforward, but it is very long prototype cycle. So getting there is challenging, but once you're there, it's very, very scalable. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think that's obviously the diabetes, the number of patients that need it is very large, so you need to scale as quickly. I bet you that's a huge benefit, plus the redundancy. You said moving past and beyond diabetes, but let's focus on what's the latest in diabetes and what's really been taken hold is a lot of the GLP-1. And so is there how has that impacted you guys? And is there even something you guys can do for, non-diabetes in that GLP-1 category? Have you guys looked at anything there?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think when the GLP-1s kind of hit, I think there was a bit of a concern that, oh, hey, this is going to eradicate diabetes and therefore you're not going to need to measure glucose anymore. But with a little more digging, the exact opposite has been shown to be true, that actually if you're on a GLP-1 and you're on a CGM, your outcomes are better, right? Your A1C reduction is improved. Your adherence to those GLP-1s is better. So it's actually very, very complementary to be on a GLP-1 and measuring, glucose continuously. And, I think one of the interesting things here is that there's a big overlap in the people that are on GLP-1s and that have type 2 diabetes. And our system is really designed for simplicity, right? Ease of use, simplicity to apply, simple to understand information. And we've also got rid of that introducer needle. So those that have that kind of potential needle phobia or fear of these more invasive devices now will ultimately have an option that doesn't have that introducer needle. So that's a big part of it for sure. And yeah, the glucose piece is big. We actually next week are presenting a poster at the EASD, one of the big European diabetes conferences, showing some data on our phenylalanine sensor. So actually being able to measure phenylalanine, which is an amino acid. So basically being able to measure protein consumption, which is a big part of maintaining lean muscle mass for people that are on GLP-1s, right? One of the negative side effects of GLP-1s is that they can accelerate lean muscle mass loss. And so, one of the ways to mitigate that is by making sure that you're ingesting enough protein and doing enough, weight training as well. And with a sensor that could continuously measure how much protein you're ingesting, as well as monitoring for muscle breakdown, super interesting, right? So that's a little farther out, but that's something that we're really looking forward to, and I think could be interesting. But just on the ability to measure glucose alongside taking a GLP-1 is a huge benefit, and that's been proven.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think, yeah, when the GLP-1s were hitting the stock market, Wall Street downgraded anything that GLP-1s were going to fix.
Yeah.
So I think everyone weathered the storm, and I think that realization that there's still humanity, and then the GLP-1 muscle mass measurement that could be massive
Yeah.
for expanding beyond diabetes to this recreational use of GLP-1s that's become prevalent. Can you explain just what a patient does right now hopefully by the time this airs you get your FDA
Yeah.
clearance
Yeah.
notice.
Yeah.
But explain just a day in the life of a BioLink patient and where they put it and does it connect to the phone, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. So we have a little bit different capability with respect to where users can wear this device. Initially, this first version will be indicated to be worn on the forearm. So a user would apply it to the forearm. And one of the unique aspects of the technology is we actually have a built-in LED indicator on the
Hmm.
device. So it can actually give feedback on relative levels of glucose. So if you're within a normal range, it could show you a certain color. If you're high, it'll show you a different color. Or even if you're low, it could show you, a different color as well. And so that's kind of at a glance, allows the user to just glance down and say, okay, hey, I'm all right, right? What I had for breakfast, those eggs I had for breakfast were all right. They didn't set me off, right? But the next morning you could say, oh, hey, well, I'm gonna try having some orange juice with breakfast and see how that does, and say, oh, hey, with a quick glance, that orange juice actually set me high, and I don't want to I actually don't want to ingest orange juice in the mornings or what have you. So um, that's one of the unique benefits. Now it does have the ability to connect to a smartphone as well. So for more detailed information, we'll have a smartphone app that users can use and get more detailed information about their glucose information. But they will have that ability to just glance down and see where they are. Now the other unique thing that we're embedding is um, information around activity. So we have an accelerometer built in. And so one of the big things we want people to be able to realize is that there's a big correlation between how much I move my body and my glucose levels. And this is something that I don't think people have a real great understanding for that, hey, if your glucose levels are high after maybe a high carbohydrate meal, you can take a brisk walk for 10 minutes and your glucose levels will come right back down. You don't have to go run a marathon to get your glucose levels in range. Literally a brisk walk for 10 minutes will do that.
That's a those are some of my favorite things online actually, is guys that will have their CGMs and they'll show you what they eat every day and
Yeah.
change it around and really give you insight to how impactful these little things are, what you eat and do that. So that's incredible. But you're saying that exercise is one of the big factors that could also differentiate BioLink.
Yeah, exercises, and so we'll be able to measure that, and then you can see that overlaid directly, in the app, on relative to your glucose levels. And then the other thing we added also is relative levels of sleep, also, so you can see, hey, how does my sleep patterns impact my glucose levels? Those are really the two big things, right? We've got activity and sleep. Those are two big ways that your body can change kind of your response to what you eat. So we want to help people understand the full picture and not just the glucose, but the whole body aspect of metabolic health.
Wow. That's incredible. So you're close to FDA clearance. What has that journey been like? I'm sure you've spent the last 10 years thinking about it and probably communicating with them. What kind of conversations have you had? What's your, safety risk level? It sounds like a 510(k), but maybe explain how you guys are getting there and how the journey from a small team into a full-fledged product was.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that journey has been amazing, and yeah, the day that we can actually start selling this product is one that we've been looking forward to for a long time, and so the team has obviously evolved a lot, right? We've brought in some of the best regulatory people on the planet to help us navigate this environment. and many of those have experience in this space. So that's helped a lot, making sure that a good regulatory team is worth its weight in gold. So that's something that we've heavily invested in. It's been a great journey interacting with the FDA. This is an area that is going to impact a lot of people, and so this is thankfully now this area is a Class II medical device, so it makes it a little bit easier. Historically, CGM had been a Class III up until the last what 7 or 8 years or so. And so that helps with the pathway. And the FDA knows CGM very well, so it's been a very productive dialogue. And yeah, overall, it's been an amazing journey getting here. And I think what we're all really excited about is that day that we're sitting in the airport and we see somebody walk by that we don't know wearing one of our sensors. That's what we're all waiting for.
Yeah, yeah, I think I've had that experience with my past products, and it's pretty exciting. You don't you want to jump up and tell them the
Yeah.
story,
Yeah.
but I look forward to that. That's exciting. I think it sounds like not just diabetes is on the horizon as well, so people will be able to leverage what BioLink is doing. So putting diabetes into its own awesome large container that you've worked for, what are some of the other avenues, if you can share what you guys have researched and what you're looking at next?
Yeah, happy to talk about the things that we've published on. One of which I talked about, which is lactate or lactic acid, right? Continuous measurement of lactate today is not possible.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a lot of interest from the sports and fitness community, really interested in measuring lactate as really the best marker for human performance. So that's something that we've prioritized, and thankfully the NIH has partnered with us on helping to advance that technology. So that's I'd say closest and kind of next in the pipeline is being able to measure both lactate and glucose continuously on the same device. That's going to give us a very interesting look at overall metabolic health because lactate is not just a marker of performance, but also can give a lot of insight to overall metabolic health. So I think there's some interesting applications there. Also for sepsis and monitoring sepsis and septic shock, lactate is a big marker there. And so there's some interesting applications. But really, why the NIH was interested in this is adding an additional input to closed loop systems, right? One of the ways that insulin sensitivity changes is during exercise. And so having input into a closed loop system that can really give information on relative levels of activity and how hard someone's exercising could be very valuable. So that was really what drew the NIH towards this. So lactate is one that we're excited about that we're pushing as aggressively as we can. We've also published a little bit on some of the cortisol data that or the cortisol sensor that we're developing. That one has been in partnership with the DoD. There was some funded work there. That uses a little bit different of an approach. Traditionally, sensors use enzymes for sensing. So there's a glucose oxidase enzyme, for example, that is typically used by most continuous glucose sensors today. But there's just not that many enzymes out there for continuous sensing. So we've started working on an aptamer-based technology, which aptamers are basically short segments of DNA or RNA, but allow you to very selectively interact with different markers of interest. And because of all the advancements in sequencing, there's a long list of aptamers that can now be used for these applications. So we're just scratching the surface of what we can measure there. And so we've shown a bit of data on cortisol, and then I also mentioned the phenylalanine for protein ingestion and protein breakdown. So those are the few that we've published on and published at some recent conferences. But as you can imagine, there's a lot in the pipeline outside of that as well. And again, this is a platform. So once we show we can do it for a couple of things, we can expand from there. So that's really what I think the most excited about is that there's so many applications, but there's so many things that we just don't understand about the human body today because there's no good way to measure it, right? I mean, we don't know what people's cortisol looks like continuously throughout the day, or when even when you're exercising or when you don't sleep well or whatnot. So combining all these things together, we're just going to learn so much about us as humans from a physiology perspective, and that in itself is extremely exciting.
Oh, very exciting. With the cortisol, I'm definitely interested. I'd like to see mental health type of components might be linked. Is that what you're referring to? Some amount of PTSD potentially, or
Actually, some of the initial applications were for, cognitive performance and some of these, war fighters that are on, whether it's pilots flying 30-hour missions or, soldiers out there in the field, sleep deprived, those kind of things, making sure
yeah.
that, we're able to make appropriate decisions when we've been kind of going at it for many, many hours. So that was some of the initial applications, but stress is obviously very tightly correlated to cortisol, and that's kind of, we always think of cortisol as the stress biomarker, and being able to measure that continuously. You mentioned mental health, that's a big part of it. Just overall metabolic health, cortisol plays a big role there. Even in type 2 diabetes. So there's a lot of recent publications showing that people that have difficult to manage type 2 diabetes, about 25% of those people actually have hypercortisolemia. So they actually have high cortisol levels chronically. And if you can treat that, that ultimately helps them to better manage their diabetes too. So it's kind of interwoven into the metabolic aspect as well.
Yeah, wow. Uh, Lots of things you could be putting your fingers into the pots in different areas, but how can you manage it? Like, how big is your team, and how what kind of growth are you guys looking to do as well?
Yeah, so we're just over 100 people located in San Diego. And yeah, it's been amazing to watch that grow from, two of us on day one to where we are today at a little over 100. Um, yeah, as we expand into different areas, that team needs to grow. Today, it's a very technically focused team. We have really we span all the engineering and science disciplines, right? That's actually one of the really cool things about developing wearable sensors is that you're so interdisciplinary, right? We like to think that we're kind of like four or five companies in one, right? You're a wearable company, so you got to develop all the electronics and the wearables aspect of that. You're a chemistry company. We got to develop the sensing techniques that we use. We're also a data company, right? There's an immense amount of data that's being generated, and what do you do with that? How do you interpret that? How do you display it to the user? And then we're a software company, right? Today, most of the way you interact with your data is through your phone, and so we have to do that as well. So being able to do all of that is that what I think draws the people that come and work here is that they get to work very, very cross-functionally. So yeah, as we grow and as we expand, especially as we now hopefully here become a commercial organization soon, that side of the business needs to grow, right? We need to expand there. We also do aspects of manufacturing too. So expanding that is going to be important, right? We have partners that do a lot of the kind of more traditional aspects of manufacturing for us, things like electronics and those things. But we do the chemistry deposition. So we take that piece of silicon that I was mentioning earlier and we put our chemistries on it. So that turns it from something similar to a computer chip to a viable biosensor by depositing those chemistries. And that's kind of the secret sauce. That's the part that most sensor companies tend to keep internal is that process of depositing their chemistries onto the sensor. So that's something that we also do is the manufacturing piece as well. So yeah, I mean, this company's going to grow pretty rapidly from here. Around 100 has been a good size to help us navigate and develop technology. But as we expand into different areas, we're gonna have to grow pretty substantially.
I'll look forward to seeing that. It's been good having you today. What I like to always ask my guests is hindsight is 2020. Looking back, what did you wish somebody could tell you? What you've learned all these years that you could tell somebody starting out? What are some of those nuggets of wisdom that you have?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. I would have to say just, be patient, right? What if you're doing something that is worthwhile, it takes time,
Mm,
and be patient. So it's a combination of be patient, but also move as fast as you can because that's the advantage that we have as a
mm,
small company is moving fast. And I think it's really about, I mean, the term grit gets thrown around a lot, but I think that that's kind of really the bottom line is you have to have that perseverance and keep pushing. And I think real innovation happens when people don't give up. So the number of roadblocks that we've hit over the last decade is more than I could possibly count. But that ability to say, hi, I'm either going to go through this wall or go around it or go over it, but I'm not going to turn around and stop, right? So I think that's key. It's this combination of patience, this ability to move quickly, and that perseverance to just never stop. That's how you make real innovation.
No, I think that's great feedback. I love that though. Patience, but don't stop. Those are two balancing things, and hopefully you can measure my cortisol when I try to do both of those at the same time. And
Yeah.
it's been great having. Any final thoughts? Anything else you want to share before we close out?
No, I would just encourage people, keep innovating. This stuff is really hard to do. The medical field is just ripe with opportunities, and it's technology that's really going to continue to advance the state of healthcare, and especially, here in our nation. I think being able to provide information to people that they don't have today is going to be really valuable. So, yeah, I just want to encourage people, keep innovating. It's worthwhile.
Oh, great words, and it's been really great getting to know you. And hopefully, again, by the time this is out, we'll be able to put a post that we talked to you before the final big moment of
Yeah.
FDA clearance. So great to see you, Jared. Take care.
Awesome. Thanks, Chad. Appreciate it.